Good morning, Sensei Suino. Welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. As you can tell, it's only Suino Sensei and I this morning because we're doing one of our micro topics. And the micro topic that we're going to talk about today is losing to learn. And is it essential to lose in life, in martial arts? So I'm going to jump in with a question for Sensei Suino right away. Sensei, when have you lost and what have you learned from those lessons of losing?
Lots of losing, lots of learning. The first thing that comes to mind is just the years and years of battling on the mats in judo, and not necessarily in competitions, but daily. In any combative where you're pressure tested, like judo or karate sparring or BJJ rolling, you lose a lot. And happily, most of those cultures recognize that losing is not a disaster. In fact, it's essential. I think it's the same in business too. The more you lose, the more you learn. Obviously, you don't want fatal losses. What you want is small losses and time to reflect. So yeah, I mean, I've lost, many times on the mat in judo to people that are bigger than me, stronger than me, more skilled at judo, more experienced at judo. Sometimes the lessons happen right there, and you say, "Oh, I stepped across and gave that person a vulnerable stance." And sometimes you just swear a lot, go away mad, and it takes a while to reflect and figure out what you've done or what you could do better. So there's a lot more we can unpack on this, but I would love to hear when you have lost and what you have learned.
Before we go to that, Sensei, I have a question for you. Do you think failing and losing are almost synonymous, or do you think they're different things?
I think they're different. At least as I'm thinking of them today. I think losing is you compete for a medal. Someone beats you fair and square. You lost. That's the end of it. You're on the mat fighting in judo or rolling. Someone taps you or throws you, right? And you go, crap, I lost, quote unquote. Failing is, oh, that was horrible. It made me so sick of what I'm doing. I'm not going to do it anymore. I quit. To me, that's failing. And I think it's a completely different thing.
Right.
How about you?
So, yeah, I guess because you could say I failed to win the tournament or I lost in the tournament, right? And so that's why my mind gets a little conflated on, I guess in some situations they can be the same things, and in other things they can't. But I think you can take similar lessons away from both of them. So, for instance, one of the things I came in this morning thinking about was my marriage, right? My first marriage. And I was like, did I lose at that or did I fail at that? And I think it's probably a little bit of both. But I definitely took, as in losing or failing, I took some great lessons away from that, which have allowed me to helped me to have this really joyful marriage now and this really great relationship now, and not continue to make the same mistakes. But I mean, for me, if we're talking losing, I'll just keep it in a martial arts context because, I've played football. I've lost football games as a team. I've lost powerlifting matches. But when it comes to karate, one of the things that stands out in my mind was a person. We've talked about him on the show before. His name is Dominic Vitiglieri. Really nice guy, super good guy, around my age. And we came up against each other. We had known each other for a while, but never really bumped heads in the tournament circuit. And then in the Canadian Championships in Niagara Falls, we found each other. It wasn't even in the finals. It was in the quarterfinals. So fighting off to get into the finals. To him, I ended up I think I came in fourth in that tournament. And that was at a time when I had been on this tear where that was my only loss in 6 years, other than by disqualification, which is losing too, but a different type of losing. Yeah, and I mean, I was so upset about that. And it was really interesting because I got in the car after and I got in the back seat of Sensei Legacy's car, and he kept looking at me in the rearview mirror, and I was just like processing all this stuff. I was mad 1 second, on the verge of tears the next second, like, um, and he looked in the mirror and said, "You know, Randy, I'd ball you out for the way you fought, but there's nothing I could say to you that's going to make you feel worse than you're feeling right now." Like there's
Mhm.
right. And then he just said, "Remember, the other guy was trying to," right? Um, so, for me, the learning lesson from that is I went away, went back to the dojo, started working with Sense Legacy. Somebody had taped that fight. So we watched that tape. And he was a lefty. And I got caught 5 times with the same dinky roundhouse kick to the body. Like, it's so weird. Like, the match ended 5-3. So I was in it, but I just lost. Like, and Setsa said, the next time you fight him, right? Because he was a lefty, and I was circling the way I would circle to fight a righty. And I was walking right into his technique over and over again. And it was Sense of Legacy who saw it and said, if you fight him again, you move in the opposite direction. That kick will not be effective. And it was interesting because then we fought each other in Panama, not in the finals, at a world championship match, quarterfinal. And the score ended up being 5-1 for me this time. And I actually got his point too because they gave me a penalty point. So it was um so again, I lost that match, and then it was a simple lesson, but it was one that I still remember to this day. And whenever I square off against a lefty, I'm not going to say I never move in that direction, but I'm definitely much more cautious of it and conscious of the fact that I'm moving to their power side into a place where they feel comfortable.
Yeah, when you stick with the game long enough, then you have a whole suitcase full of those things, right? And so, and in the beginning, you have to think about them carefully, but after a while, they become second nature, right? So you're just playing at a much higher
Right.
level. I got a couple things I want to share. One is the way you talked about failing made me think there's an interesting context. If you say it retroactively, if you are, you know, you leave a tournament and you go, "Oh, I failed to win that tournament." That seems different. You're still in the game, you're thinking back, and if I say that, it means I put the loss on myself. I failed to win that tournament. I had things that I was working on that I knew I should do and I didn't do, right? That's what I failed to win that tournament means to me is is I didn't live into my own standards. If you're beat by somebody else, that's not a failure to win a tournament. You just were beat fair and square. Someone was better than you that day. And then context is everything. When I as a little kid, my biggest win or whatever was getting a silver medal in the AAU regionals in judo when I was a kid. And for me, that was a wild, wild success. Um, it wasn't a gold medal. Honestly, I didn't even care because, first of all, it was one of my first big tournaments. So I didn't really have the context to think about it in history. But moreover, because that's when I discovered my ability to go into tournaments and fight with a level head. Because, for a year ahead of time, I had fought so hard with the guys in my dojo, and most of those guys senior to me were beating me pretty regularly in the dojo. But on that day and that tournament, I beat a lot of those guys to get to the final round. And so it was a huge victory to me because A, I fought great matches, but B, I beat guys that normally beat me because there was a shift in perspective, right? That I was handling the pressure better than they were. So I walked away with a silver medal. I still treasure that to this day. I was like, holy shit, how cool is that? It wasn't a failure, or even though I lost a match, right? It wasn't a loss to me. It was just that. So context really matters when you're thinking about losing.
I think you're right. And I like that a lot. So I think we're starting to cover off when is it good, right? Failing or losing is good when you take important lessons from it and you can move forward. And when is it bad? Like, when do you think it is bad to fail?
Oh boy, it's bad if you didn't do enough. If you knew better and you didn't do better. It's bad if it's so traumatic. You know, if you lose a match or if you lose a street fight, it's bad if it's so debilitating, right? That it like hospitalizes you or forces you out of what you want to do or love. And it's bad if it makes you fail. If you, you know, like, how do I say it politely? If you give into your weaker nature and let adversity cause you to quit, that's bad.
It's funny you say that because that was one of the things I was thinking about. When you lose, what part of you makes you quit? And I think it's your ego. Loss connected to ego is one of those things that's going to drive you out of the thing. And if you can keep your ego in check, then you can handle your losses and learn a lot more if your ego is not doing the talking.
Yeah, and you know what? How quickly can you turn that cycle? So I got two things real quick on this. One is I don't think it's bad to get angry or upset when you lose. Um, you know, it's better if you don't, if you have the perspective and just go, okay, well, I'm going to move on. But if you get angry, but how quick do you turn that cycle? Okay, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm going to do this, and then you know, I'll give myself to a count of 10, and then when I'm 10, I'm productive again. Um, I had a kid come in for karate interest the other day, and his mother warned me ahead of time. He has a lot of trouble with adversity, and sure enough, he had a great lesson. First lesson went pretty well. Second lesson, we got about 20 minutes in out of 25, and he had trouble figuring out which foot to step forward. And he had trouble twice. The third time, he stops and he goes, "I'm bored." And I looked at him. I go, "You're bored?" I go, "Yeah." I go, "What do you want to do now?" He goes, "I'm going to quit." And I go, "Well, if you quit, that's, you know, that's the end of this lesson, and you know, we can move on." Okay. And it was heartbreaking because I mean, at that point there was no more convincing him, right? He responds preemptively that he's failed and discovered challenges in his life are too much for him, too embarrassing, right? And so he has developed it. And the poor kid is only like, I don't know, 11 or 10 or something, but he's developed this defense mechanism. As soon as he encounters adversity, he just goes, you know, he's not really bored. He says he's bored. That's been a convenient excuse. What it really is he's embarrassed and he wants some way out. That would be an example of how to lose badly, and especially if you build that construct for yourself where you're losing in advance, right, without even giving it a fair try.
Yeah, and that's even though he's a young and aware of his ego, he still has one. And
Mm,
that's the thing that he said it clearly. I don't want to be embarrassed, right?
100%, right?
And I think I agree with you 100%. As a matter of fact, on the emotional side,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's a concept you taught me inadvertently on the side of the mountain, um, because I was hanging a tarp over the fire pit. And Dano said, "But if you hang it over the fire pit, it might melt and blah, blah, blah." And you said, "The tarp works for us. We don't work for the tarp." Right.
Yes.
And then I've started to say that to myself all the time. Right. And I think with emotion and ego, that's one of the things, right? If you're working for the ego, it's not good. But if the ego is working for you, then that's good. And that's the thing I think that allows you to flick that switch on a loss or a failure is the ego kicks in and then you say, "Okay, that fucking sucked. I feel like shit. I want to cry. I want to smash my fist through the wall. I better get my ass into the dojo and get training really hard." That's you making the ego work for you instead of the ego telling you, "Go home, get in bed, pull the blankets up over your head, never do that again, and you'll never feel that again."
Man, you get the effing Suino Sensei annual award for leveling the lesson up. I just love that. You know, I started that because people are always so consumed about like, oh, I spilled this coffee. I'm so, you know, like all that little stuff works for us. We don't work for it. If you take your whole life working to try to save money so you can have, you know, you can't eat bacon once in a while, it doesn't seem like you're living a rich, full life. And honestly, it's not going to get you anywhere. But you took the lesson to the next level, which is experience can work for us. And even the things that we think are our own, our emotions, our egos, right? Those can work for us. What do they work for? They work for our greater self, our sense of mission, right? They drive us forward. That's huge. And I'm going to take it one more level for you. The people in our, this is the hard part. That's such a powerful lesson, and it can be so decisive when you're talking about coffee or you know, your paycheck, you know, the firewood, the tarp. Um, but when you get to people, you now need a little nuance. You know, I could say, "Oh, I don't work for Randy, Randy works for me. But in fact, where it gets interesting is we we do best when we work for each other, right? The world and ourselves works for our mission. And if we have an overlapping mission, we get on that boat and row it together. That's fucking powerful. That's the extension of this lesson 2 or 3 levels up. And that's, that's why we're doing cool shit together. And, the best people in your lives are rowing that boat with you.
Yeah, you said that the other day in a meeting that we were having with another karate school, and you said, just as another analogy of what you just said, you said, I'd rather have more partners than customers.
Mhm.
Right? Like, which is, I think what you just said, kind of essentially, like, it's better when the mission overlaps and you can have more people together. And don't people enjoy working on something that they feel they're helping to create? Right? Doesn't that give everybody a lot more passion? And then if you fail or you have a setback, then everybody has the setback and everybody can come at it with some perspective, which was one of the things I was going to say about losing. Is it ever bad? I agree with you that losing is bad if you're just too fucking lazy to do the work, right? I was always petrified of that, to be honest with you, that I would stand across from somebody that had done more work than me, but they were not as skilled as me, and I had lost because I just didn't bother to do the work. My mom used to be like, you can stop studying now, or you should go outside and like go for a walk. And I would be just like, no, because if they asked the question and I didn't read the thing and I could have read the thing and thought about it, then that's going to be a huge problem for me, right? And maybe that's telling me something about my ego, that's because everybody's egos are slightly different. They all kind of function the same way, but what triggers them, I think, is different. The other thing I think about it is if you don't have a good team around you, Sensei, because then when you lose, it's bad, and you might not have a way to figure out how to fix that mistake and move forward, right? Which, you're one mentor who said, a genius is the person who, right? That's kind of the same thing, right? I am blessed to have teachers and mentors around me that I trust and love and care about. And when we do stuff together, like if you and I promote an event and we don't hit the target, we're like, okay, well, how do we hit the target the next time, right? But we have the skill and resources around us to either figure it out ourselves, or B, we'll talk to Hanshi Tarian, we'll talk to Hanshi Legacy, we'll talk to other people who are ahead of us in that game, and they'll help us to fix that thing, and we'll come at it different the next time. So if you don't have that around you, I think losing and failing can be debilitating, right? Because you get stuck and then you don't want to do it because you don't have somebody kicking you in the ass or helping you out.
Yeah. I just want to make sure when people watch this, when you stated that cliche that my mentor used to tell me, you broke up a little bit. So it was a little hard to hear. So it is, a genius is someone who never makes the same mistake once, right? And you kind of answered the question, how is that possible? And that's possible by learning lessons from others, right? Not just your own losses, but other people's losses, other people's wisdom, and you know, and moving forward. And it's just like you said, that toolbox that you have when you fought a lot of matches. In the beginning, it has to be very deliberate, and you have to kind of think of those things before you do the thing that you're involved in. After a while, that stuff becomes almost natural, and then right, that's wisdom. That's applied wisdom. It becomes part of you, whether that be in business, relationships, as you've talked about, et cetera, et cetera. The more people around you that you can put in those positions and be mentors or partners or friends. We build events, and we look to Hanchitarian, for example, as somebody who's for decades built really great events, and we have a lot to learn from that guy. So hopefully that means we'll make fewer mistakes because we have somebody to learn from.
Right. How about this question, Sensei? Do you think losing/failing can be, or winning, right? Winning, achieving. Do you think either of those things can become habits? You habitually lose, or you become a habitual winner? Do you think that's just part of your mental attitude of how you approach the thing, or What do you think about when I say that statement?
I think they can become habits. I think two things. Your mindset matters. If you think of yourself as a loser, you're probably more likely to lose. If you think of yourself as a winner, unless you're delusional, you're probably microscopically a little bit more likely to win. But it really comes down to work habits. You know, when I was thinking about this leading up to today's conversation, back in the day, one of the things my karate teacher liked to do in the old days was do push-ups. So we'd have these morning workouts for an hour, and we do a kata and we do 10 push-ups, a kata and 10 push-ups. In the beginning, you hate the push-ups. You hate the push-ups. In 3 months, you go, wait a minute, I like the way my pecs look. In 6 months, you go, I can punch a lot better than I used to be able to. And in 2 years, you go, anytime I want to drop and do 100 push-ups, I can do it. This is pretty freaking cool. So then all of a sudden, what happens is the push-ups no longer are a pain in the ass. They're just something you do, and sometimes you even enjoy them because you've connected the outcome, right, with the work. And I think if you do this business, if you're lucky enough to have the right people around you, or the mindset, or the character, or just good fortune to win a few times, and you're able to pair that in your head with what you do leading up to it, that becomes a habit, and it's no longer onerous, right? You're sweating, you create physical effort, or you're sitting at the keyboard typing and you're like, your body wants to be tired and move away, but you just do it. It's the sitting at the keyboard version of push-ups. When you pair it to the outcomes you like, it's a lot less of a pain in the ass to do than it is when you're just doing it because you have no idea why it's important.
Right. So what I heard you say about that, one thing I thought about were the habits, right? So when you form habits, then they lead to results, like period. Like either positive results or negative results. Your habits are going to lead to one of those things. But I think, and we've chosen, this is the path. We are going to be on this path until we are on some new level. So then you form these habits and keep tweaking these habits. Do a kata, do 10 push-ups. Where I've seen it be really negative is I remember watching my son, he was a top 17 hockey player in this community from the time he was like 7 until he was like 16 or 17. And he was on a couple of really dreadful teams. Like they were just not the players all had like unlimited potential. They were just really poorly coached. And you could see they were very lost and disorganized, and where other teams were not. And that's not even really the point of what I'm saying. But then they got in the habit of not giving a shit, but they were committed to the season, right? It's not like they could all of a sudden stop and say, right? And so when you're committed to a time frame, but you no longer give a shit, I think that's a real negative, because it those those negative habits where you're just like, yeah, well, we're going to lose the next game anyway, so I'm not going to try so hard in practice. Billy never gets my pass, so I'm not going to pass it to him. And we lost. I don't give a shit. We're just going to go to the hotel and go play mini sticks anyway. So that's where I think, and then I think some of that carries over to other things that you do in that microcosm, right? So that's where I think failing can be habit forming and really negative to somebody's life. Because there's thought and action behaviors that just through habit, they start to get grounded. You don't have the good mentors around you, and then that trickles in from the hockey game to your relationship, to your work. And whereas one thing I've noted is people like you and I, the habits we've formed in this long-term commitment, they really bleed over into everything in life. Your other work, your other relationships, like you take those same strategies for learning and winning and achieving them in other areas. And it's incredible how much good things start to happen.
100%. I mean, that's the importance of having good mentors around you. If you're in that situation where you got a shitty season, you should still, it's not easy. Nobody's saying that, right? But you should still be doing what you can with what you have where you are, like still doing your absolute best, maintaining a mindset, be the best shining example on that team For them, yeah, but mostly for yourself. Like, I don't want to live anywhere else, but at the very best, that's hard to do. But you need good parents, you need good coaches, you need mentors. Um, and I love what you said about that. Um, if sometimes I take the leadership role with you and I say, hey, listen, Randy, this is something I think you ought to think about to make our group better or make yourself better. If I'm sitting at work in a conference leading and I remember that, I go, holy fuck, I just told Randy this last week. I better make sure I'm living into that. And when I meet him again, I better have something, right? That's not only what we had, but something better. So it's like it's self-perpetuating. I wish we could make it. I'm saying this out loud because if wishing were rainbows, they would all be unicorns and they'd fly up somebody's ass. So I'm not going to wish this. I want to do better. I want to move this faster. I want to turn the cycle of improvement personally for you and me and for our endeavors even faster and more efficient. Um, just what I said now is a reminder of that I just want to double down and do even better.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say is when winning becomes or achieving becomes a negative. And in my mind, it becomes a negative when you stop doing work. You just rest on your levels to this game. If I was going to say one of the things I'm proud about myself was when I was somewhere in my mid 30s, and this might sound very ego driven, and I don't mean it to be. I know there's tons of people who are better at karate than me. But I would consider myself like a 1%er. And so anybody who is in the 99%, I probably could have beat them at half speed. And yet I continued to do the work and train as if I was still trying. And today I still train at the level that I'm trying to achieve a world championship. And I think winning is bad when you think you've arrived. And then you stop doing all the great things that helped you to get to that place.
Yeah, great point.
And I think when that happens, the fall is so much greater. Like, when you're at that up there, and then you've seen it in so many professional athletes where like you can see they're just kind of starting to coast, bad things are getting into their life, things are happening. Then when they have that first loss, they never really recover from it in life or in whatever their endeavor was.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I love that. A side note that I don't necessarily want to go down, but if you win for a while and you let that turn you into an asshole, that's another way to lose. Um, but let's not do that. I think you're right, and I think one of the secrets for me is to fall in love with the process, not with the outcome. Winning is wonderful. It's really exciting. Tomorrow, you got to put in the work, right? You got to win tomorrow. Just because you won today doesn't mean you're going to win tomorrow. And happily for me, for you, a lot of the really high achievers or really happy driven people I know is we all love the process. We love the work. We love feeling good, right? Like I love the work of keeping my health at its best. I love the work of working out really hard. I love the work of working on kata and then seeing it get better and then figuring out how to get better yet, right? I love the work of doing these conversations and figuring out, okay, that was interesting to talk about. That brought these new ideas to light. How can I do better tomorrow? When you fall in love with the process, then you can win, recognize what it's for, and then keep moving.
That's another lesson I learned from you at one of our events, the Crucible. You made a simple statement, and I get these brain worms that just I can't stop thinking about them. And then you apply it to like everything. And you said at the Crucible, the joy and the pleasure. And so many people, like when you win, that's the pleasure. But there's a lot more joy in the training and the people you meet, and to get to that one moment in time where they put that medal around your neck, that's the pleasure. And I think if you live only for the pleasure, like you need to have the pleasure in mind, everybody needs to experience it, but you need to live for the joy, man. The joy is like 99% of it, and the pleasure is 1% of it.
And it's funny, this might be a little esoteric, but I think when you take pleasure, how do I say this? When you have joy, that's the universe giving you energy, like it, right? I feel like that gives me more energy for life, more productivity. It's not even about food or caffeine. It's like the joy being in the state of flow gives you energy. Having pleasure depletes your energy. As fun as it is, as wonderful it is, it doesn't drive you higher. I have to think on that before. I don't have a clever saying about that because I haven't thought about it this way before, but I think joy's better. Joy's just better in my humble
I
opinion.
think that's I think that's a universal law. I think you're 100% right about it. I think it's biological, it's mental, it's spiritual, like, and it's true. It's 100% true. Um, you think about, like, you have a good fight and then you win. Like my first BJJ match in a tournament, like it was so fucking hard. Like I mean, I was good enough to be poker faced and just stay calm and breathe and relax. And then when I won, there was that moment of like, wow. And then as soon as that moment was done, I was like, oh, I need a nap. Like I need to drink a bunch of water. I got to go sit down somewhere. Right.
Right?
I mean, you can think about intimate relationships with people in that way, right? Like I just think that's a law of the universe. Since I think you hit that right on the head, and that's a button. Pleasure
Yeah,
takes away energy and the joy gives it to you.
that's amazing. Yeah, I want to explore that more. I'll be doing some thinking, and we might want to chat about that in the future because if we can share some of this gold with the people in our network and our students, I think it'd be really useful.
Right. Yeah, well, I'll say to my students sometimes, say, are you training right now for the joy or the pleasure? Are you looking for the pleasure, or are you just enjoying the work? Right.
Mhm. Our alarm has gone off, sir. That is our 30 minutes for this micro episode. I told you that would go fast.
So that's great. And I know we're back on tonight with a host chat, so we can maybe even, I'm sure we'll drift into some of these tonight. But before we go, I always like to say, like, we're really close on it. We've been working very hard for a number of years. Really proud of what we've done for our community. We have really engaged people, and some of them are like at the apex too, which is really cool. So if you can, go on YouTube or Spotify, any of those places, put some likes and some comments. If you don't mind, doesn't even have to be big. It helps us, right? It really does. It helps promote the show, helps in the algorithm to get the show to come up a little sooner. And guess what? We're not charging anybody to tune in and listen. So if you could just help us a little bit, that would be great. And then I still, since have not written down your staff member's name. That helps out with the show?
Emily Ruth Driscoll.
So we want to thank Emily Ruth Driscoll, Robert Schlumsky, Andrei Sedichev, Sydney Dauphin, Justin Shea, Mike Russell, Josh Kishins, Daniel Holland, Jesse Ville Vito, Christiana Landolt. Just this show really, like, so many hours every week go into, if all those people do 1 hour a week, we're at a full-time job for one person to make this happen. So just always want to show gratitude and thanks to them.